All right, so now we're going to go straight into our panel. And the objectives of the panel are really, so you had an introduction by Akbar, welcomed you as well. And so now we have an opportunity to introduce you to some of the leaders, the movers and shakers in the NAS, as I like to say, that will provide their perspectives. And I think these perspectives are going to be really helpful as you go and read or go to the breakout sessions and listen to the content. So the panelists, what we'll do is essentially start on the far end down here with Mike Huffman, and we'll proceed to the right, and they're going to basically introduce themselves, and green is forward and red is backward. And so the format is set up so that the majority of this time will actually be the panelists introducing themselves to you and providing their perspectives. And then we'll have a time where I will ask a question of them while you guys are entering questions on that conference IO system that I just described. And then we'll take questions from the audience as well. So not to steal any more of their time, and Mike, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off, I'd appreciate it.
Thanks, Al. I really appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Huffman. I'm the TFDM Program Manager. I don't know if, for the folks that do know me, or the folks that don't know me, I've spent a lot of time in the FAA. I've got 35 years working on my 35th year working for the government. Most of it's been with the FAA, deploying systems in the NAS. Al thought it was important for me to get up and talk today about TFDM and the fact that it's a real program and it's coming to your airport soon. So I'm going to go through a couple slides. Obviously, I'll answer questions, but really the focus for my briefing is to talk about TFDM, when it's coming. This is going to be quick, but it's just to make sure that everybody understands that it's not a concept still. It's not an R&D system. It's a production system, and we're already getting ready to deploy the system to the NAS. The FAA feels like this is a very important system. It's the next-gen solution for the surface. It's also the surface solution for ITBO. So it's a critical system to be deployed in the NASA in order for us to move forward with the future of aviation. TFDM, if you want to get more information, always make sure to include our website. So if you need info on TFDM and the program and where we are, you can always go to the website. If you don't want to type all that in, if you just Google TFDM and the FAA, it's the first site that comes up. But it's TFDM is the integrated tower automation system. We're going to provide a lot of capabilities for the controllers, but also with our interactions through SWIM with the operators and airport authorities, we're going to provide collaborative decision-making capabilities. It's one of the key assets, and it's the capabilities that ATD-2 has demonstrated at Charlotte, and it's going to provide a lot of benefits. The FAA, when we went through the business case to get the program approved, we estimated there's about $2.2 billion worth of benefits we're going to get out of the system through its life cycle. A large portion of that is the fuel savings, 313 million gallons of fuel we estimated, and those are pretty conservative estimates. Based on what we've seen from ATD-2, we've underestimated what we're going to be able to achieve. But it's going to take the cooperation and collaboration with all you folks to be able to make TFDM successful, especially at the top 27 airports. We're going to deploy our surface metering and our surface scheduling capability. Our integration with TBFM and TFMS is critical also to be able to achieve those results. So the program is moving forward. We're making good progress. Right now we're in operational testing at the Tech Center on our first software build. We'll be in Phoenix next month operationally testing that software build also. We do have another software build we're already working on to include some improvements that the controllers and technicians have asked for, and that's being finished up in the near future, in the end of September, that build. I'm going to start going through another process of DT and OT on that. And the plan is still to get to IOC in May of next year for Phoenix. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, talk about where we're going with the program. So here's a map of all the different sites that we're going to. Going to 89 sites in the NAS. It's not all the sites that have towers, but it was the sites that were chosen for our program baseline. I did want to back up a little bit that, TFDM is important to the FAA. One of the things they did that is unique on my program is they gave me a 14-year program baseline. Realizing the importance of the program, they've allocated and decided that the FAA that TFDM is so important that we're going to fully fund the program through 14 years. Most programs get a 5-year baseline and have to go back every 5 years and justify the program. We've already spent about $250 million on the program so far since 2016. The program's so important that they plussed up in FY20 another $22 million. So in FY20, I'm going to spend $135 million on the program. So it's important to the agency. It's never going to go away. It's coming to you soon. These are the sites that we're working on. These are the sites that it's going into. All the sites that have color, the blue colors are the sites we've actually already installed systems in. Phoenix obviously has had a system for a while. We've got systems deployed, I'm sorry, the green color, to the academy and the depot. We got 5 systems up at the tech center that we're using for testing and second level engineering support. We've actually already installed our electronics in Charlotte in the new tower. So we're getting ready for the Charlotte system. And then all the other sites, we've already started basic pre-site survey and site surveys and pre-install activities to line us up so as soon as we get our in-service decision, we can start rolling the system out. So the system's coming real soon. We are planning to stay on track with our build 1 capabilities at Phoenix, and then in Charlotte in 2021, we'll be deploying the capability there. So I'm going to go to the next slide. I just included for reference. I'm not going to go through every single site, but we did have an impact because of the furlough when we basically slipped the program about 4 months. We've had to adjust every single IOC date in the Waterfall. The Waterfall's on the website. I included it here, so make sure that everybody has that when Al gives out all of the slides. And I appreciate everybody's attendance on this. TFDM is an important program for the agency, and it's important for us to move forward with it. So I appreciate all the work that Al and NASA have done for ATD-2. It's been a blessing for TFDM to be able to demonstrate the capabilities that we're going to deploy in a system in an R&D environment, but it's actually in a real-world operational environment. And our expectations have been exceeded at ATD-2 in Charlotte. Definitely exceeded the benefits estimates we had for TFDM in Charlotte. So we're happy that you guys are doing the work, and we're pleased that everybody's here attending this conference. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Let's give Mike a round of applause for that great input. Moving on to Ernie.
Green, right?
Yes.
Hey, good morning. Ernie Stellings with the NBAA. Did a couple slides here. There's not much to it. I'm really just going to talk not off the slides, but just a little background on me. I've been with NBAA for 15 years plus. I know most of you here. I see a lot of faces that I know. Manager of their air traffic services, those that are familiar with our desk at the command center. I've got a staff of guys that work there really kind of advocating for business aviation. We go back in the CDM arena, from the beginning. I mean, back before I actually was working there, I was running a fractional flight department, and we used to be on the CDM, like what they call the E-Stump group that had the slots and all that. That's kind of how I got involved with it. And then when I came to the association, each of our guys at the desk kind of contributes to one of the CDM teams. And so I've been on the FET for many years. I've been the co-lead since I think 2009 or 10. We do a lot of work with mainly en route stuff. So as this project has gone into Dallas now, we definitely have an interest in that. There's a tasking that we have with the surface group that kind of addresses the Metroplex environment and that type of thing. So we're doing a lot of work with that. Our roots kind of go back to the original surface CDM team. I mean, my colleague Dean Snell, who couldn't be with me today, he was on that team from the beginning. We kind of tag teamed it together, the two of us, over the years, and so we've had an interest in surface from the beginning. Mainly because we know that when you look at that waterfall, a lot of those airports really don't have a big play for us, but we've always been challenged, for our membership, 11,000 plus companies. How do we get our small flight departments involved in some of these efforts that the FAA is doing? And we're realizing that we would never be connected up like a lot of my colleagues here, the air carriers, would be to all the different infrastructure with the FAA. But we wanted them to have the opportunity to participate. So when you look at like what my interests are mainly here, it goes back to access and the ability to participate. And so if you look at our involvement with this project with ATD-2, I mean, back with Charlotte, we started a few years back soliciting our locally based members there and working with Al, his team, and also MITRE, and we're going to have a session here later on a little bit on mobile apps. But we really were looking at, okay, well, how do you get a small GA pilot who's by himself? He doesn't have dispatch, doesn't have anyone else to really work with him. How does that guy participate in this? And so with the help of those guys at MITRE, we've kind of gone through a progression of a mobile app that's become a standalone kind of a website now that you can go into. You don't have to have it, dedicated to your phone, but the guy out there on the line who has this is all he's got. How does that guy participate? So they've heard us, and they've built the capability. There's some stuff they're doing now we'll talk about that's being done in Vegas that's going to transfer over to Dallas as well. So we're going to work with these guys next to me with a lot of the surface stuff in Dallas as that comes apart. We knew that there had to be a way for these guys to do this, and this is the way we saw it through a ForeFlight or some other application. So when I got and speak to the SWIFT groups and other groups, I see the vendors there, we look to those guys because we know that eventually this research effort will become a tech transfer that goes to all the vendors to build for our people, and that's how we see it, our participation in this. But, I think for most of our members, maybe they won't go to some of these airports, but the ability to actually log in and be able to do that, send EOBTs and get information back that they're not able to get now, is important for us. And I guess that's really all I have from my perspective. I mean, it's really, creating the ability for our people to participate and play in this as it gets bigger and moves out to different parts of the NAS. I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank Ernie for his input. Appreciate that. Probably a transition going from a slow-speaking Texan to Ernie there. He really gets the info out.
I only had one cup of coffee, thank you. I got it all out at my FET meeting yesterday, so I'm really slow today. And it's hot in here.
Thank you, Rick.
Wait, who's the slow-talking Texan?
There we go.
Good morning. I'm Rick Dalton from Southwest Airlines. I'm not the Rick Dalton in a movie that you may have seen recently. Have you ever had one of those mornings? This morning has sort of been like a microcosm of my experience in the airline industry. Come to find out, there is an Omni Hotel in downtown Dallas, and I presented myself there for this conference. And thank goodness my spirit guide manifested itself in the form of a gentleman named Tim Turber from SeaTac. Some of you may know him. It's probably the terrible way to pay him back for being my navigator on the way here. So at about 8:05, we realized we were not at the correct Omni Hotel. So great to be with you all this morning. I hate to talk about me. I'll do it because it's relevant for a couple of minutes. I'm an ops guy from Southwest Airlines. I really didn't purpose to join an airline. I did it rather serendipitously 34 years ago, and worked with a great group of people, learned what the contagion of airline operations is like, and just developed an appetite to learn about airline operations and got as close to ops as I could. And so I drove provisioning trucks, and I threw bags, and I worked weight and balance and ground ops, and then moved over to flight ops and worked in the dispatch office. Was the director of our ops center for the last 6 years that I was there, and worked with some of the fine people I see in the audience. I won't call them out. Some of them helped me stand up the first air traffic desk at Southwest Airlines. Was a fairly early participant in CDM, about 97 or 98, when I entered and began participating in CDM activity, and have had a unique perspective of airline ops when you look at the constructs of what we're trying to do today to integrate functions of airlines and empower them with data. With much richer sets of data and much more robust processing power and much more sophisticated analytics to bring about capabilities that we can't achieve today, not because they're not achievable, but because we just haven't tapped into the right resources yet and coupled resources in the right way and increased the sophistication with which we set out to fully optimize our operations in this complex system. I'll probably stray from my slides here a little bit. But so back in December of last year, I think it was, I gave a talk at the SWIFT meeting, and I tried to sum this up in terms of operational integrity, because that's what ATD-2 being just a part of what's happening with emerging capabilities in the system. I thought this slide was indicative of the kind of considerations that were underway at Southwest Airlines, where we were considering how we harness the power of the data. I don't know how many airlines have data science centers. I don't know how many airlines are cultivating their efforts around data innovation, but I think that's where we at least should have an equal portion of focus and priority in the matter of improving the conditions in our operational environment and the capabilities that we have to accentuate that. This slide about making time for a good operation, just to show a little bit of our soft underbelly at Southwest Airlines. We're in the process of looking at how our flight times move through our systems as a piece of data that's critical to keying off of and triggering certain actions from the various parts of our operation. If you're familiar with airline operations, it's a highly orchestrated affair. And our network is just one little network inside a much bigger network of networks. So as we look at the data that we're using, the juncture with this idea of the big data era and how we move the airline into that space is no better manifest in the activity that's happening in the ATD-2 program, as we attempt to, and I think have done quite aptly, prove the concept and benefit of filling this hole in the system today. We have a fairly rich data set on air traffic movements once they're airborne. And depending on, just name a vendor, you can get pretty good data on what's happening on the surface. But if you don't integrate that data into the rest of the systems that we're using to marshal and as fully as we can optimize the capacity that's there, to go after that latent capacity in the system that we know exists every day, we just don't have quite the agility. We're just not quite nimble enough to seize that capacity. So I view ATD-2 as another very important building block, and certainly TFDM programmatically being crucial to how the NAS proceeds in its ability to operate more efficiently. So what does it do? I looked at the list of participants, and I too know many of the folks here. Am honored to be a part of the panel today. Thank you, Al. So I'm not going to attempt to explain what ATD-2 does. It's already been pointed out. It's providing benefit. It's been proven to do so. Intuitively, the ops people in this room know this is what we need to cultivate, what we need to develop and fully integrate into our operation. And, you know, when we look at the capabilities of ATD-2 and what it does to bridge across some of the gaps in our operation, it's providing us, if you look at what I characterized as the pull-through value of this, the integration of it across our airline to provide better data in a broader context. You can't have this conversation without talking about SWIM, and that's just that. That's the gold we're after. That's the data bank we want to break into and figure out how to harness as much as possible. So across our efforts to better understand how weather and ATC, our tech ops maintenance mission, our crew efficiencies, station ops, our efforts to elevate the level of customer service that we can provide in this very complex system, across a network of extremely complex and often seemingly conflicted objectives, we critically depend upon the advancement of these capabilities so aptly demonstrated in ATD-2. Mr. Josh Gustin.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Rick, for those great perspectives.
Thank you.
And Josh?
Rick's always a tough act to follow. And Rick, I was just trying to think back. We've been together for a little while. I can't imagine, I'm going to pick 4 years ago, you saying the words data scientist. I think that's like a new thing, right? It's like we have all embraced this data world, so that's pretty cool that we're really figuring out how to break it all down. And I think you all know, and I'm a believer that the world is really driven by data. We're just finally figuring out how to do it in the NAS. I'm Josh Gustin. I'm the FAA's manager for Communications Information and Network Programs. I know a lot of folks here, and you probably don't know what that means, and I say it every time. So kind of under my portfolio is a bunch of infrastructure stuff in the FAA, the networks that drive the FAA that we call the FAA telecommunications infrastructure, all the radios, 60,000 of them across the NAS that talk to airplanes, all the voice switches that the controllers use to hit a button and connect a controller to a pilot and make them talk. And under that information world, SWIM. Rick just mentioned it. Mike mentioned it. The SWIM infrastructure. I didn't want to date myself, but since everybody else was throwing out numbers, I feel like I should. So I've been working for the FAA or around the FAA since 1991. And if those of you that remember back in those days, the ETMS system and the ASDI feed, I've been part of that data part of the FAA my entire career around various aspects, to the point of joining the FAA in 2003, being there for the invention of SWIM, and now kind of coming back around only a few years ago, running this division, which includes SWIM, and our latest foray of putting SWIM into the cloud. I was a big part of that, I'll just say it that way. So SWIM, I think we know that exchange of data between the airlines and the FAA and even the airports and around this conversation is crucial. Al really teed it up really well. It's kind of a partnership, right? The benefit doesn't happen one without the other, and the way we're going to make that happen is with that infrastructure that we call SWIM. This is the simplified version of SWIM. If I can, Al, just quick show of hands. Everybody knows what SWIM is. You've heard about SWIM. Just, you got a flavor. Virtually everybody in the audience, so I'm not going to go deep, but just think of it as the exchange mechanism, for in this case, between people outside the FAA and people inside the FAA. FAA programs inside, like TFDM, and an airline like Delta and their ops center. Securely, authorized, data integrity, all that stuff kind of baked in. That's what it is. We started this, again, ASDI, way back in the 90s, was basically about flight data. Now SWIM has taken on all of the data that the FAA gives out through kind of a single mechanism. That's what this diagram represents, all the data available on SWIM. It's an overwhelming amount of data, and that's the problem. So earlier in the 90s, we had a lot of conversation about, can I just have and then go away? And we did that, and we provided data and went away. But now we're getting really sophisticated. So now we're getting to well, thank you for the data. What does it mean? What do I do with it, and how do I change my business with it are really, really hard questions. As we invented SWIM, it also took on a life of its own. Many of this room, many of our operators, many of the solution providers, I think is the word used, Al. I like that. I'm going to use that, the vendors. You get SWIM and you know SWIM, but there's also an industry around this that uses SWIM as well, like Google and Uber, that do things that are non-aviation. So that makes SWIM for me a challenge because it's really big. To the point of how big, you can kind of look at the eye chart with some of the data. This is a little older, but at 4.3 terabytes of data per day that the FAA is pumping out. So we often think about a single airline and the overwhelming amount of data that they take in, which probably doesn't include everything. It's probably very focused on those data scientists and those needs. But when you add them all up throughout all the users and all the different ways to look at it, that's the amount of data that the FAA has to support moving every day. Oftentimes we get, why is it so hard to make a little change to one of our security boundaries or firewalls? This is why, because we affect all of this world of data every time we do that, and we want to take it seriously no matter what there is. It gives you a feel. Again, though, SWIM, FAA's mechanism, the amount of data in SWIM, just simply overwhelming to take in, technically, but also to figure out what to do with. To the point of the SWIFT, a little over a year and a half ago, we invented the SWIFT. I was a part of the NAC, not in this role. At that Next Gen Advisory Committee, I was biting my tongue as I heard the SWIM conversations because it wasn't my job at the time, and I'd have a lot of back office conversations on what to do. And as I took on this role with SWIM, with being that part of that leadership of that role, I saw this gap that needed to be filled, and we just couldn't figure out how to do it. So we invented the SWIFT. And the whole idea is not to teach everyone every data element in SWIM. It's to really figure out what to do with it. So to understand the business problems, understand the data that's available, and bring the two together and apply it. And also share, kind of as a face for the FAA that I get to be on all of this data, be that front end for all of the programs like TFDM. Once we're out there in operations, the what do I do next questions, the how do I do it questions, the how do I integrate it with these other things going on like a TBFM or TFMS questions. Bring those to this forum basically so that I can bring in the right experts for the conversation and the right users can be in the conversation together. Very similar to CDM of the past around operations, but just heavily focused on that real data scientist, data level element, bringing together that business operations need and that very technical IT need with a lot of those data scientists right in the middle of that. So it's really working. It's a great venue for doing that. We're only in, I think, our second year. I'm looking at Rob, who co-chairs that. And you can see the stakeholders that show up are great. It is a public forum. I'll say all are welcome, although we start kicking you out if we can't find a big enough room, which has been a problem of the last one where we co-hosted with ATD-2, which drove the room size bigger. And selfishly, there's the next workshop. So for anybody that wants to snap a picture, I think Al's going to put that up later as well. You're invited if you think it's relevant. Again, we've had a heavy focus over this first year or so on that outcome of the NAC, which was very much use cases and diving in individually with airlines to figure out specific data elements and share that with the community. And we're evolving into kind of next steps. I think a lot of what you've heard here today will be taken on, like what Ernie brought up with mobile apps and how you support that with something like SWIM as well as other things. So I think that's me for today. Thank you. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Rob Goldman, but enough about me. I'd really like to thank NASA for all their hard work and putting together this forum. I'm going back, Sean, what is it, 5 years-ish when all this started? We were at Ames with Leighton, and we were talking about tech transfers. And it was very specific around the code of at the time, TBFM. And then we started talking about how we would tech transfer ATD-2. And that's really what this is all about. It's not only the technology transfer to Mike and his team, but it's the knowledge transfer to the industry. And we really appreciate what that affords us. TFDM, TBO, where we're going in the NAS is incredibly complicated. We've spoken about the data integration, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but we're in an area where we have never been before, and we thought we understood it. You know, we had of course, the surface CDM ConOps. Ernie spoke about that, and those are just concept of operations. There were white papers about how to make this stuff done, but ATD-2 actually did it. They brought life to the project. They brought life to the program, not only from the FAA side, but how the industry is going to interact with it. So that is a huge opportunity. If we look at other programs within the NAS before us and perhaps after us, nothing like this has been done before. So again, thank you, Al and team and everyone for doing this. It's incredibly important for the industry. So why are we doing all this stuff? Why are we doing TBO? Why are we doing SWIM? Why are we doing SWIFT? Well, it's about our customer, right? If we are not improving the travel experience for our customer, we're in the wrong business. So when we start looking at all these neat things and neat graphs and new ways of doing business, we always have to say we're doing it for our customers. We're making their life better. And how we do that is we focus on capacity, throughput, and efficiency. We truly believe that data-driven and time-based integrated traffic management is going to deliver a better product to our customers. And so ATD-2, as the precursor to TFDM and our future state NAS, is going to deliver that to our customers. So again, I don't have a whole lot of introduction material, but again, I wanted to thank NASA for putting this together so that we can drive our NAS forward, that we can integrate the data, that we can make life better for our customer. And I want to close on one last piece. We're always talking about data and SWIM in the context of managing the NAS. There's a huge other piece, and that's the analytics piece. It's how do we get better at what we're doing today? How do we find patterns in the data? How do we correlate that data to the experience itself? And I think that's a huge opportunity that ATD-2 has. There's reams and reams of data that has come from that system. And we can go back and we can look at it and we can analyze that and then figure a way to integrate not only our aviation system, but the evolving aviation system with new entrants like space travel and drones and all these other things. So again, thank you for having me, and I look forward to the questions and being part of the panel.
Thank you, Rob.
Oh, no, the green button.
Good morning. So my name is Carol Hugel, and I'm representing American Airlines here today, since we're talking about numbers and how old we all are. So earlier this spring, I marked 30 years since I walked into the door at ARINC. And when I walked into that door at ARINC, Building 6 in Annapolis, Maryland, I was a software engineer. I could have worked at Under Armour. I could have worked at Kodak. I happened to be working at an aviation company. And within 3 years, I would tell you I was sort of sucked into aviation. I like to say I was injected with the old adrenaline, and I would tell you today, it now runs through my veins. So over the last 30 years, I've had a lot of different roles. I've had just a privileged career thus far in terms of the organizations that I have been privileged to represent and the people who make up those organizations. So in those 30 years, I played, as I said, I've had a lot of different hats, but I have had one constant for about 22 plus years, and that is this just fascination with the airport surface. So I've been with American now for about 2 years. That has all gone by in a flash, and I like to say I've spent about 28 years getting ready for the role I have now. So I have always served the airlines, the airports, the FAA, like everybody up here. I've worked with many of you in many different capacities and really affected change in, I would like to say, in measurable ways. So what I do today, I am very privileged to be responsible for our air traffic management strategy as well as our surface traffic management strategy. which, like myself in this industry, is morphing. And I'm just thrilled to see what our airline has done in Charlotte, what we're doing right now in DFW, and has been a huge, huge partnership. A word I think that you guys are going to hear a lot over the next couple of days is about collaboration. I think in some ways I'm sort of the, if you look at sort of the teeter-totter and the seesaw, we're talking an awful lot about technology, an awful lot about data, but everybody on this panel and a lot of you in the audience today have heard me say it is so much about business process. And as the lead carrier in Charlotte, it has been such a learning process, an amazing, amazing partnership. And the technology, as you guys have heard, starting off with Mike Huffman, has truly brought significant operational impact and measurable benefits to us. But we've been doing that now for a couple of years, and I would tell you we're really still in the very, very early, almost embryonic stages of talking about the business process. And I love Rick's comment earlier about harnessing the data. We do need to harness it in a way that our humans who make up all of our organizations can actually apply it. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I just have a couple slides, but really want to say that a real constant in all of this has also been, once you've seen one airport, you've seen exactly one airport. I coined that phrase back in 1998. Then I was charging a nickel for those of you who used it. It's like up to $1. So there's my POC information. I'll give you the wire transfer information as well. Dude, you owe me. How much did you give me then? Excellent. Okay. So a lot of you who know me know that I have a very simple mind, and I do often like to start with what problem are we trying to solve? A lot of innovative people who sort of jump to the end. And so this picture really does enunciate the problem that we are in fact trying to solve. It is JFK on that fateful day in May of 2009. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we've come to be where we are, because I think it's really, really important to not lose focus on the genesis and where we're trying to go. So for me personally, on that day, I was working at the company who put that little picture up, and I actually got a call from customer service, and they said, we think that the system, there might be something wrong with the system, but nobody's calling. So I made a couple calls up to JFK and found out that there was in fact nothing wrong with the system. This is in fact exactly what it looked like that day in JFK. Okay, so a little bit of walk down memory lane. There's a timeline you guys can all go take a look at. But I think it's really important to look at this timeline really as a demonstration of CDM at its finest. So you see guidance along the top, you see response along the bottom. RTCA is no longer with us, I'll just say. But they did play a really important role in terms of providing guidance, feedback to the agency. And many of you in this room were parts of many of those different groups that are listed on that timeline. But really my message to you on this is that we, the industry, asked the FAA for TFDM. No, we did not articulate it as Terminal Flight Data Manager throughout those many milestones, but we did in fact say to the FAA, we need this. I really like Nancy Kalinowski's characterization of the issue on the surface as the final frontier. Why is it we can know almost down to the nanosecond what our jets are doing from point A to point B in the airspace? We have no earthly idea what's going on the surface. So I do see it in many ways the way that Nancy characterized it, which is the final frontier. But this is just a huge shout out to the FAA for, in this case, as Mike alluded to, this thing is fully funded for many, many years to come. That's very unusual for an FAA program. And the industry's influence has been really, really significant. So again, back to collaboration, back to partnership, and that's really not over. I see it very candidly as just beginning. I often say in the halls of American Airlines, coming soon to every airport near you, because I think it's important that folks understand, especially the carriers, that it's not just about our hubs, but everywhere that we fly, where there's a significant operation, we're going to need to be a participant in TFDM. So really, really huge, big shout out to the FAA. Oh, and before I get off the slide, so it ends there somewhere around 2014. I also think there are a lot of people not in the room who have been so instrumental in getting us where we are today. But in this particular case with ATD-2, I really do think there's a big recognition needed for General Bolton as well as Jae-Won Shin, who both collectively got their heads together and said, how do we get something out there? These people are passionate about this particular concept, surface CDM, but we got a long way to go when we're talking about a program at the FAA. So I think that was just huge that people said, okay, let's try and get something out there, and voila, ATD-2 in Charlotte. Okay, really this slide is just meant to say there are benefits for everybody here. NASA's done an amazing job measuring, quantifying the benefits in Charlotte, and I would say there are many intangibles there as well. But really what this is intended to say is we're back to collaboration again. No matter what hat you're wearing, and really it is all about the customers, as Rob said, but no matter what hat you're wearing, you have a role to play in order for this to be successful. And again, since we asked for it, it really is incumbent upon everybody to make sure we're there to make TFDM a success. Okay. Ooh, bad button to push. There we go. Okay, so what I want to share with you on this slide is really about ATD-2 in Charlotte, and those who have visited us, there's a lot for you to see and understand. But really what I want to share is a lot of what you see in Charlotte actually is not coming with us to TFDM. So I like to say that the NASA team is going to take all those fine toys away from us. But really my message to you is that you cannot start soon enough to get ready for TFDM, which means that all those pretty boxes and all the things that they do in Charlotte today, we need to find a way as participants in TFDM to replace those great toys with something else. So folks need to be thinking about the data, but also how do you present that data to somebody who needs to use it? So we invite everybody to come to Charlotte, see what's happening in terms of the technology. Also think about business process. How does this look to my teammates who are going to actually have to implement this? So all really great stuff in Charlotte, but what you see is not what you're going to get with TFDM. Okay, so TFDM, there's a huge transition there. My message here is really very much about traffic management initiatives. We have not had a new traffic management initiative in the NAS since 2005. That's a really big deal. And I would suggest to you an even bigger deal is this one's really, really different because it's reaching back into the gates. That's not an area where the FAA typically dabbles. Again, we did ask for this. But there's a lot that we need to take a look at in terms of business process. So generally speaking, when you hear TMI in the ops world, that's not good, that's all about delay, it's gonna cost us money. So we're all gonna have to work collectively, collaboratively on how we position this, particularly internally, that this is actually a good thing, as counterintuitive as that may sound, but really, really big deal, and we're gonna have to invest a lot of time in the business process. Today, we talk about things that we need to explore. For example, how will the pilot know? How will the gate agent know? Who makes a decision as to where this silver tube is actually going to hold? Who's going to communicate that to air traffic? What about TMC? What about staffing? So there's an awful lot that we need to look at in terms of business process. But I look at that really as very much a part of TFDM readiness. Data, tools, technology, really, really important. But how's this going to work? I asked somebody, so do you expect to see this on the OIS page? No answer. So a lot we need to talk about. Okay, so I just thought I would share another slide because here we are 10 years later and we are still trying to solve this problem. But we're all here collectively, at least I choose to believe we're all here because we know that this TFDM program is going to have a huge positive impact on the national airspace system. And anything that we at American can do as the launch carrier to be helpful, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We have a lot of folks here who'll be here today and tomorrow and on other panels as well.
All right, thank you, Carol.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I am Paul Sichko of the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. I'm wearing a couple hats up here on the panel today. Since everybody seems compelled to date the panel up here, 40 years ago next month is when I started my aviation career. I was, yeah, I'm old, Marcus. I'm just this side of dirt, okay? I started as an air traffic controller with the FAA. And back then, the FAA controlled airplanes, separate airplanes. The air carrier flew the airplanes, and the airport did their own thing. So over the course of time, we learned the great value of integrating the three legs of that stool to work together to enhance the customer experience. Dallas-Fort Worth Airport is infatuated with providing an exceptional customer experience. The livery of the aircraft, they're pretty, they're real nice, but they are all our customers. And we have learned that partnering with air traffic and the air carriers is vitally important. So DFW is driven, it's innovative. We pioneered the end-around taxiways. We've got some space out there, ladies and gentlemen, at 17,000 acres. That's both a blessing and a curse. For those of you who know the DFW operation, we can triple load the two primary departure runways, 3 taxiways. We can separate them by fix. But when you go out there during a departure push and you see 17 airplanes waiting in the queue pads, the departure pads on each side of the airport, and they're all turning their engines, DFW is heavy into environmental stewardship. First carbon neutral airport in North America. We very much value what the ATD-2 process is doing, the successes at Charlotte, to meter airplanes out, to get to the runway and eliminate all the holding that you saw in Carol's slides. And we very much value the fact that the North Texas NASA lab is right here across the street at the campus of the Fort Worth Center. Trust me, we are across the freeway all the time. We gladly accepted the invitation to participate with NASA. The ATD-2 displays are up in the Airport Operations Center. They're up in our ramp control facilities. We are trying to leverage as much data as possible. So we just last month broke ground on a new integrated operations center that will house all of DFW operational departments, other key departments. The TSA Coordination Center for DFW will be in the building as well. They're already with us today in the existing facility. And the key to this new IOC at DFW is not to maintain watch. Rob mentioned it. We need to use the data with business intelligence and analytics, and as the goal of the DFW IOC is to be proactive instead of reactive. We want to be tied into the SWIM data feed. We want to watch what a line of thunderstorms does 100 miles north of this airport, and to see how that will change the arrival stream, how we handle recovery and delays, how the airport can move even janitorial around to match what's happening in the terminals as we have gate changes, to adjust concessions schedules, all based on analytics because we've had 1 or 2 thunderstorms down here before. My previous life is at Minneapolis-St. Paul, where we've had just a few blizzards. So you understand the impacts of that, and previously everything has been reactionary. So we want to use this data and be proactive. My second hat here, and we thank you very much for the invitation to the table. CDM, you all know about. There's also an A-CDM. DFW is one of 4 airports to participate in the FAA's Airport Collaborative Decision-Making Pilot Program. And I'm here to represent the good work of Rob Kelly and his team at Fort Lauderdale, Ralph Tamburo at the Port Authority, and Charles Hall out at Las Vegas. Throw DFW into the mix, and I think everybody in this room understands that those are 4 very different airports, and how data exchange and the use of data is unique to each airport. In fact, Mr. Hall was, throughout the process here, he was just fixated with data in his customs facility and how many airplanes were coming at Las Vegas if he was backed up in FIS. What we learned through the ACDM process is important for a two-way data exchange. It first started out as what can the airport provide to the system. We started out identifying data elements. We've identified the most important ones to the process here. EOBT comes off the top of my head. The major carriers are participating, but the question comes, who handles the international operations at DFW? Who handles corporate aviation? A business jet is going to take up a slot in the overhead stream just like a 777 will. Well, the airport operator can certainly do that. The MITRE, I mean, we've all got these little devices. And I think the MITRE handheld mobile app to enter the data is ingenious. When I first saw the demonstration, I said to myself, well, why can't we just pass this out to our corporate aviation department? Let them enter data. Why can't we put this up in our ramp controls and cover all the other international flights? The technology here is advancing so quickly that it's sometimes tough to keep up. But we're committed to do that as far as the airport. And probably the greatest benefit of participating in the ACDM pilot program, in addition to setting the foundation for the TFDM at the 27 airports, was that our ITS people, I've got a team of analysts, Dan and Eugene are in the room here today. They are figuring out ways to use the SWIM data to the airport's benefit. We integrated the SWIM data with the DFW Airport Operations Database. And all that stuff, that streaming come through, the data is almost endless. It's how you effectively apply that. So we've learned some things. We've partnered with the FAA on the development of surveys to the TFDM airports. We're taking a lot of lessons learned at the 4 airports, and of course I can speak for how we handled certain things at DFW. But this is all exciting stuff, and it all comes down to customer experience and customer service, because we want to get people where they want to get to, and we want to make it very reliable. So I look forward to answering your questions this morning to the best of our ability, and I thank Al and Sean for their invitation to represent the airports here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Testing. Oh, first of all, I just want to thank the panel again. I couldn't have imagined a better opening. There was a homework assignment, if you will. You're allowed to provide a slide to introduce yourself and your perspectives, and you guys knocked it out of the park. So thank you very much for that. I think you guys will all appreciate those perspectives as you go to the breakout sessions over the next couple of days. One of the things that I think was illustrated this morning is there's a variety of perspectives and even different cultures that are at play as we try to solve problems in the NAS. We can have the best technology in the world. We can even have the best procedures and training. But there are some cultural changes as well that get ushered in with these new technologies. They take time. And the only way I think we get there is through collaboration. It is through listening, and it is through taking what we think is a good idea, getting feedback on it, and iterating. And so that was very valuable, I think, to the audience, everyone. So let's flip to the conference IO system, please, Terrell. Thank you. Looks like we already have some questions coming in, but I'm going to ask a few more while give you guys a moment to continue entering them in and upvoting questions that you like. To the panel, one of the things that I heard a lot of you mention data, mentioned some of the services that you'd like to see available, business processes, collaboration, new TMI. But one of the things is, from your organization's perspective, what is the number one area that we need to all really be thinking about in terms of preparation for the future of TFDM? I wonder if anyone wants to start us off with that. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, I think it goes back to what you just described. There's 2 pieces to it. I think we all spoke to the data piece, and Carol also to the process piece. And to be ready for TFDM, we have to understand how those 2 fit together. and certainly ATD-2 and the demonstration that's been done in Charlotte and now here in Dallas is providing a lot of insight into how we're going to do that. Now, the interesting piece here in Dallas is the tosses and the multiple trajectory option sets, and you know, that's something that we think we understand, you know, how that's going to play out, but certainly in the demonstration that is going to take place over the next few months, we're going to see. So, you know, again, back to some of my original points, I mean, you could read PowerPoints, you can read white papers on this stuff, but to actually have these things in real time, again, SWIM is complicated. You know, that's why we have SWIFT and
No, it's not.
You even said we need it. You know, so you know, your favorite, right? ETA, multiple services. We have an ETA. Which one do we need? Right. So those are the kind of things that, of course, your team, Al, has learned over many years in Charlotte, and then in the exercises here in Dallas. And then the next piece is how do we apply that? What are the processes? You know, how are we going to manage to it in the Ram Tower? So it's really combining these two disciplines and executing.
Thank you, Rob, for those perspectives. Appreciate that. Josh, you had something?
Yeah, just for, so we've talked about this in the SWIFT, and, you know, we've gotten into some roadmaps of data sources coming, and TFDM was just the poster child as we did that, but just happens to be the latest. And point to the airlines that are trying to invest in your own IT, point to the vendor community. It's not just, hey, let's do this in Charlotte today, and tomorrow you're going to have IT to do this. There's a big lead time to just getting the basics underway before you can ever even pull the data out of your systems that you need to then exchange with the FAA to make TFDM happen. So the key there is really the lead time. If you intend to do this and you're not already on SWIM, get that behind you. Just those basics of getting your IT to do that, to get the data pieces together. Even what we started with, Mike, I think we kind of pushed that the first data exchange would be used by TFMS. And it was a limited set of data elements, but it gets behind you your connectivity, your ability to exchange, and then you can add more to it to meet the TFDM needs. That's a long lead time item. So I would just push on that data science, the IT side, all of your business systems that you have now, those all could touch a lot of this. So you need to get ahead of that game. That's all.
That's a great point, Josh. And Rick, I think you had something?
Yeah, to key off of something you said earlier about this sort of cultural shift, there is I think the three of us were on a panel not so long ago, and I alluded to this. It's a very competitive space, this airline industry. Realizing the inherent benefit of being quality data providers is extremely transformative. If you're an airline entity and you haven't awoken to that, it's important to get there. It's important to have technology departments that aren't just about bits and bytes, but they understand these concepts. They attend meetings. You as an operator should be in those meetings, involved with the planning increments that emphasize the importance of performing in this space and how critical it is for each one of us. It's incumbent on us, and we're beholden to each other as operators, as entities in this thing we call our air transportation system, to get this right, to provide high quality data, and to reconcile your ops strategies. We have an ops strategy team at Southwest Airlines. I wish they were a little more intimately engaged in this space. I'm the business process owner of SWIM, and I've sort of become this quasi-evangelist, if you will, as to the importance of this kind of thing across the disciplines in our company, many of which aren't operational disciplines, but that's what they're there to serve. So if you haven't addressed that cultural thing inside your entity, whether or not you're an airline or a vendor, the importance of this data exchange, it can't be overstated.
Can I make one point to something you said that sparked something? We're always talking on the context of the data itself, but equally important are the business rules, and we talk about that, and the logic behind the data. So Rick, you mentioned, we're competitors, but if we all participate together, we're going to have a better NAS, right? And that's what we're trying to evolve to. So if we have to ensure that we're using the same logic when we make these predictions. We were speaking about FSM in the hall. If my demand predictions are even a few points off from the FAA's or yours, I mean, we're not going to have the best results. So in addition to getting on the same page with respect to the data, we have to get on the same page with respect to the business rules and the logic itself. And I know the fuser is helping along those lines.
Thank you. That was a great response. Really appreciate that. We're going to go ahead and open it up to the audience now and some of the questions that I see here. I'm not going to start from the top. I'll start on a little bit more of a humorous note here. Rick, the audience wants to know if you're happy with your character's portrayal in the Quentin Tarantino blockbuster film Once Upon a Time.
I am my own stunt double.
Okay, great. So I'm going to probably skip over this top question, number 22 there. There are some questions about the technology gap. Oh, first of all, latest on Dorian. Please just look at your phone on that. This panel and its objectives aren't on that. I was the one who entered that question, so. The technology gaps between ATD-2 and Charlotte and TFDM, we may come back to that. But before we do, there is a question on that was also speaking to the cultural changes, right? So what are the cultural changes that need to take place at the airports to balance internal operational metrics and off-gate metering? So I think this is hinting at the area of D0 metrics. Are there some cultural changes within the airline community that are necessary? Because really kind of what we have here is a tension between the philosophy of if you push back on time, you're going to arrive on time. And in general, there's some truth to that, right? And with surface metering, we're really trying to approach this from an environmentally friendly and a fuel efficient manner. And what we've been able to demonstrate at Charlotte, which is consistent with the SCDM concept, is that we're not talking about adding a new delay here. We're essentially saying this is time that you would spend out in the queue, waiting, but you're essentially just shifting a little bit of that back to the gate, right? So there's the potential for that to conflict with the D0 metrics, which I know are really key in a lot of the airline operational meetings, weekly meetings on how is a particular facility doing. So can maybe some of our airline folks speak to that and some of the challenges that have been involved? How do we get away from D0, and do we have to evolve our metrics? Would anyone like to?
Sure, I'll take that one. I would suggest to you that that's going to be a challenge for us at American Airlines. We are tackling the D0 philosophy. I like the word philosophy. Folks think that that's a DOT metric. It is not. It is a self-induced philosophy that most of the carriers practice. Weekly reviews of D0 out, I think it's, hourly at least. So it's constant. Terminal Flight Data Manager absolutely flies in the face of the D0 philosophy. So what we're trying to focus on is metering hold, get the word delay out of there because it is a hold, and the fact that you can take the hold either on the gate or elsewhere on the field. So we're also trying to transition the thinking to A0, A14. As Al said, it sounds pretty reasonable, right? Depart on time, arrive on time. But if you go back and you look at the slides from May of '09 and most recently in 2019, you know, you kind of get back to how's that working for you. So I would say it's a challenge internally. Those of you who have been tracking surface CDM for all these years, one of those meetings, Robert Isom was actually quoted in one of the trade publications, so we kind of had a nice chuckle about that. But really at American at the highest levels, we are pretty committed to D0, however, also looking at transitioning that to A0, A14. And I can tell you that many of our executives absolutely understand ATD-2 and where it is that we're trying to go. So I would say folks have softened about that. And when you look at the benefits in Charlotte, you can have a very fact-based discussion about it.
Thank you. Any other comments from the D0 side?
Yeah.
Ernie?
So you just had me thinking about something when you said cultural change, and we've had a huge undertaken, I guess, in that regard, because our community, a lot of times for various reasons, a lot of our flights will fly 30 minutes early because guys want to get the airplane ready and all that before the passengers come up. And what we've found is that our times are terrible, right? So when you're trying to build a system that's based on accuracy, that just doesn't work. And so there's a huge educational effort on our part to make sure that as we go into this future, that our members are able to submit better times. And you'll see in the presentation later that we're doing that, at least in the Charlotte example, getting guys used to inputting the times and actually going in and updating those times, which they'd never done before. They usually just file and that's it. We got some pretty good statistics on that the conformity was a lot better. And so we're just going to keep pushing that as we go forward with this to make sure that our community is, putting in accurate times. Otherwise, this will never work,
That's a great
A
point.
little bit different than the A0, but I figured it was a good time to bring it up.
Related question up there.
Yeah. What is that, Paul?
There's a question up there, when you have a hub and spoke schedule, if you delay in the gate, what does it do to that inbound that is immediately scheduled to use that gate? And that's a fair question, and I'll first state it from the airport operator perspective, once again trying to make this a partnership. There's X number of gates. They take a long time to build, trust me on that one. But when you do have that supply demand, and if it's a fixed supply, how can you maximize efficiencies? At DFW, what we were doing is, as 3 years ago, there were 3 separate ramp control functions, 3 separate areas handling 3 different parts of the airport. We are transitioning to put all that ramp control in American hub control, even the common use gates, the international gates. There was some concern from the other air carriers, but it's the airport's responsibility to ensure that there is fairness and there's an LOA in place. Procedures are very clearly outlined. We also partnering with American Airlines on a resource management system. We're going to be on the same common platform, an electronic platform that even though the airport controls a common use gate, if it is available and requested by any other airline, it's going to be electronic requests with all the gate adjacency conflicts programmed into the system, where you make a seamless electronic request and authorization to use a gate and to maximize the gates. DFW is also infatuated with airport performance, and we look at metrics, and we looked at A14, and we looked at taxi-in times, and we realized that some of that may or may not be out of our control, but there's things that I can take a look at. I can increase my gate turn times of common use. I can watch that metric very closely and partner with all the other air carriers down here to say, you got an inbound waiting, how about if we do this? And we can make that an electronic process as well too. That's what moving forward with some of this data-driven business and analytics, real-time decision-making, and once again, being proactive instead of reactive.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, one more comment on this, and then we'll move on to the next question.
So 2 parts. And Paul brings up a good point about the inbound, right? And that's always been the criticism, if you will, about holding at the gate. But that's also one differentiation between SCDM, our concept here in the United States with the FAA, and ACDM in Europe. We have the flight intent. We have that data element that allows the airplane to push from the gate and hold into some other area. So that's an important piece because we do have that flexibility, at least with the concept. And then just sort of agreeing with Carol, D0 is a concern with Delta. Going back to the customer, I think A0 is most critical. But the station manager's performance and the optics are still on D0. So we have to figure a way to educate, and I know the FAA is doing a lot of CSID activity, collaborative site implementation teams, but that's something that is of concern, is that D0 component.
Thank you, Rob. I'm going to switch to a different question here for Mike. Mike, you kicked us off, but have been relatively quiet since, so get you talking here. So the question for you was, let's see, which one was it? It was about how are TFDM implementation sites and their implementation start dates determined? Are they based on traffic demand and delay, or their TFDM readiness?
So actually, there's a multitude of factors that went into how we decided the waterfall for the program. We knew first off we were going to Phoenix, and we picked that key site before we went to the final investment decision. But there's a lot of work that has to go on to the sites to prep them, be able to install the equipment. Takes resources from other parts of the agency to be able to do that site preparation. So the waterfall is a balance between trying to maximize the benefits for the program and hitting large sites to be able to get the return on investment, and feeding in to the waterfall other sites spread out around the country to be able to spread the resources for the people that are doing the work to do the site prep. So it's a combination of trying to get return on investment by going to large facilities, but also interspersing smaller facilities in there to be able to get utilize the resources, get the sites implemented. So it's a combination of things.
Thank you. I think
that was pretty much locked in stone when we went to the FID in 2016. We have made a couple changes in the waterfall, but for the most part, it hadn't changed since then.
And while we're with you, I want to stick with you. You and Carol and Eric Cole, who I see in the audience, will have a breakout session tomorrow and talk about some of the preparation and readiness. And so this question is also readiness oriented, and it is, what training or outreach should users or industry start now to be ready for TFDM rollout at their airport, especially at those airports that are early on the waterfall, such as Phoenix? That's really one of the goals of this two-day workshop, is to start identifying those areas, right, and to raise the level of awareness of that. And I think in your panel session tomorrow, you guys will discuss that, but maybe you could give a brief intro to that, or if others here really feel strongly about an area that folks need to start on today, in particular in the area of training, is what this question was about. I'd appreciate you weighing in on that. Anyone? Any takers?
I mean, on the FAA side, obviously, Phoenix is a key site for TFDM. It's primarily our initial capability with electronic flight strips. It's more focused on the air traffic side than on the interaction with the airlines. We're going to go to Charlotte in 2021. That's really our first key site for the collaborative decision-making capabilities and surface metering. We will be returning to Phoenix to implement those capabilities in late 21, early 22. So we'll have to, increase the interaction with the operators at that facility then. We have a large outreach and training for the FAA that we have to do. Our workforce, not only on the technician side, but primarily on the air traffic side, the training required takes a long time. Phoenix will take us probably 3 months to train all the controllers, just to be able to get them off shift, rotate them through the training, and get the prior to implementing the site. So there's a big load. We have a big workforce that's going to be put in place of cadre instructors that have to rotate around the country just to do the training on the FAA side. All our technicians will be going to Oklahoma City and rotating through the facility there to get trained. But for air traffic, we have to rotate around the country with a large group of people just to get the controllers trained to implement. I don't know if anybody wants to address on the operator side.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just tag on to what Mike shared. So from my perspective, I would categorize it as the near-term focus should be on education. So I'll just share a personal experience. I was in ATC Tower a couple of weeks ago. It was not Charlotte. And I was talking to the ATM about TFDM. and I was very interested in what their approach would be in terms of preparations. So he thanked me for the question and told me that they're probably a little bit behind, and that we were up in the cab, and he said, so if you look around and ask anybody here what TFDM is, they might be able to tell you about the electronic flight strips, but we have not started to tackle it at all. So that really kind of struck me. This is not a small airport. And so we had a really good dialogue about how could they, in fact, get started. So my recommendation was to send some folks down to Charlotte, and then once they came back from Charlotte, we could have a dialogue about how we talk about this from a complete airport perspective. So I think a lot of it is about education and having folks understand what this concept is. Like anything in life, when you've been doing something for quite some time, you tend to lose sight of the knowledge that you have, and that when you're immersed in something, you don't necessarily focus on how important it is to bring other people along. And this is going to take a community to be successful at each and every airport where TFDM is going to be deployed. Once you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport, which means the implementation is going to be a little bit different at each and every airport. So I think education first, and then folks reach consensus about how to approach training. So maybe a core group, everybody kind of understands what's going on, and then branch out from there.
Thank you. And Rick, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to add on the operational awareness piece of this. There has to, Rob mentioned business rules and processes, all those downstream implications of coupling a capability like TFDM to NAS management trickles down into your operation. Right now, we're in the midst of developing a whole new suite of decision support tools. We've gotten a little ahead of ourselves in terms of what the reconciliations that are necessary for some of the business rules and processes that are there that we need to keep out of conflict with all of these external mechanisms that are used to manage the movement of our airplanes. So part of that is general awareness, and we're doing that internally. We'll see what kind of pacing, how effective our pacing is, but that's there needs to be a concerted effort to coordinate that and reconcile your business rules and processes with what TFDM is going to require or expect of you.
Thank you, Rick. Yes, and I hope that the next couple of days, as some of that reconciliation is identified, that we can document that and more fully lean into answering that question about the specific training that's necessary. It's pretty clear we're not going to get through all of these questions, right, in the amount of time we have. And so I'm going to give the panelists a moment to think about this last thing, which is I'm going to ask each of them just real quickly to describe what they're most interested in seeing in the next couple of days. But I'll give them a minute to think about that. But what if you wouldn't mind, Terrell, flipping back over to the slides, I appreciate it. I signed us up, if you heard earlier, to answer all of your questions. I don't think I realized what I was really signing us up for at the time, but we will endeavor to do so. So we didn't have time to answer all these questions interactively, but we'll go back and do our homework, and I hope that the panelists would also be willing to help us answer those questions, because it's one thing to hear from NASA engineers, it's another to hear from the actual users of the system, right? And so from my perspective, we got a clinic on that, on perspectives from many different roles that are necessary to consider to be successful in the NAS. So I'd like to go ahead and start wrapping up here, but that last question, why don't we start with you, Paul, and then we'll work our way down to Mike in terms of, over the next couple of days, what are some of the things that you're keeping an eye out for?
As we move to TFDM and those 27 airports, I'm not going to pay her any more royalties about you've seen one airport. But I'd be very interested to field questions from engineers as to how we can best streamline the process among those widely different airports. when you look at Charlotte and DFW, I'm really looking forward to the Phase 3 results, compare them to what Charlotte has been able to accomplish. Because I mentioned, DFW is an entirely different airport. Maybe 40 years ago, I would have started a concrete company in the Metroplex here, and I wouldn't be sitting here. But we have to maximize the amount of pavement that is out there. And what we can do at DFW, you're not going to be able to do at Minneapolis or Phoenix or Portland. How do we identify the critical elements across the TFDM? You know, identify the baseline, identify the minimum optimal criteria, start with that baseline, and then customize per airport.
Yep.
So if the engineers want to ask which is the critical data elements, our 4 pilot programs spent a lot of time looking at that. And we've got our list. We happily shared it with Greg Bias and team at the FAA. We'll share it with you. And if I just may once we talk about time, the amount of time it took for us to move forward on the ACDM pilot program. If we want to initiate TFDM, we've got to go very quickly. And for better or for worse, lawyers are part of our lives. And the development of the memorandum of agreements were time consuming. But you can't play the game unless you know the rules. So let's get those knocked out as quickly as possible. Let's find out what's expected of all parties, and then we'll be able to move forward and meet timelines.
Thank you, Paul. And I saw you mentioned Ralph Tamburo earlier. Saw that Ralph has made it here as well. So thank you guys for representing airports and port perspective. It's really important to consider in this space. And Carol, what are you looking forward to over the next couple of days? And if you want to give a plug for yours, feel free.
So I guess for me, I'd really like an understanding of how much work is left to be done from your perspective for your organizations to be TFDM ready. So from my perspective, it's right around the corner. And as the lead carrier, I know how much effort we have put into TFDM readiness at just Charlotte. So I think it would be really important to collectively understand how far are we from being ready for TFDM. And then based on that sort of assessment, informally, obviously, what needs to come next in order to make sure we are all TFDM ready? So I put up that slide, which is, you know, really a walk down memory lane in terms of the concept of operations for the surface. And you'll see there's almost sort of an end, right? So we're all very focused on ATD-2. But do we need another forum or forums? Maybe a workshop is the right answer to try and get folks really ready for TFDM. So, you know, where do you fly? What are your local airport and air traffic business partners doing? What needs to be done? So a lot of focus on the waterfall, which is understandable, of course. But it almost feels like that's the easy part based on our experience in Charlotte and all we've learned and all we've yet to learn. So for me, I'd just like to understand as an industry, you know, if it's possible, where are we? How far do we have to go? And do we have the mechanisms in place that people need to get ready? Going to Charlotte is great, but as I said, there are what you see is not what you get. Which means folks need to go back and try and understand for their organizations, what do they need to do to be ready?
Thank you, Carol. Rob?
Yeah, it really goes back to my opening remarks, right? This is a learning transfer opportunity, and we're always talking in the context of TFDM because that's the surface component. But really, this is broader than that, in my opinion. This is TBO. This is trajectory based from the gate to the next gate to gate, and it also includes new entrants, the space and the drones and all that other stuff. So what do we need, you know, to operate in that paradigm? So that includes the data, that includes the business rules, that includes the logic behind it, that includes the process, and that includes the hardware. How do we put that all together and make it work in this NAS that is coming sooner than we think? So hopefully the next few days will help us get there a little sooner.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Josh?
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo what Carol said a little bit more on the technical side, that low-level swim side. Al, we had the luxury of the last Swift again, and we peeled, because of the shutdown, peeled the technical track out and did that, so I've already seen it. So I've already lived your next few days 2 months ago, so 3 months ago. So I'm very interested in the future part of what we're going to do, and from this audience, given that we did that at the Swift 2 or 3 months ago, where are you now in learning that? And really for the airline specifically, if you recall back to, again, that NAC meeting when we signed up to two-way data exchange, and then a year later went, oops, what did we sign up for? Let's get going here. And are we there? I mean, especially for the majors that are in the room, seeing what we exchanged today, I don't think we are all. And what's it going to take to get there? And again, balance with the waterfall needs of when you need to be there. So I'm interested in learning more about that.
Well, anytime I'm at a conference with Rob Goldman, I like to hear what he has to say about RNP and thimbles worth of fuel savings and that kind of stuff.
I didn't do it this time. I was going to do it. I was going to do it.
Second, I'm interested in that broader context too. How this, as one advancing, emerging capability in the system, is being sequenced in a way to meet the milestones we've got at a broader programmatic level. My team manages or is responsible for our interface with the FAA on next-gen concepts, and as Rob mentioned, this is about a number of concepts coming together to work in a way that truly has the prospect of being transformative for the NAS. So that's what I'm here to see, to better understand the state of readiness of all of the players in this space, is what I'm here for. Thanks.
Thank you, Rick.
I'm really interested in the TOS panel tomorrow because the flow evaluation. I can't even speak. See, you got me talking too fast. Now I can't talk at all. The FET team is met yesterday. They're here, and we've had an open tasking with TOS enhancements for several years, and the new joint surface tasking has a lot to do with that. Our input on TOS in the future with this concept, and so as we look toward to the Dallas endeavor, we clearly want to be a part of that, and so I'm curious to hear what Tim and the other guys have done. We've worked with these guys for years with some of that stuff, so that, and then also if there are any vendors that are here, I forgot who else on the list, but if they want to talk about the mobile stuff, I'd be interested in hearing from them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think it's important for everybody to take advantage of the opportunity we have here with NASA. They've learned a lot of lessons from ATD-2, and we want to get that information to everyone. And so for me, I think it's important for everybody to do their best to try and absorb all the information that's going to be available. TFDM, from an FAA perspective, can only go so far. There are pieces of the ATD-2 system that are not going to be deployed with TFDM. It's going to be responsible for the operators to be able to ingest that type of information and produce their own systems. To be able to absorb especially all the information that's going to be published by TFDM. Josh talked about the number of terabytes that they're publishing today. I think when we start going online with TFDM, it's going to go up a terabyte by every site we deploy, because they're going to be publishing so much information every day. So I don't know if you know that load's coming, but it's big. But TFDM's going to, everything that TFDM knows is we're going to publish it out. The system's going to publish all this information along with a lot of statistics. So you guys need to be familiar with what's coming in that TTP interface and be ready to absorb it all, because all the data analytics you want to do, we're going to provide all the information for you. All the information we glean for all the other systems that are in the NAS, TBFM, TFMS, and other NAS systems, we're going to publish back out. All the STARS data, all the ASIX data, it's all coming out through TTP. So try and figure out how you're going to hook up to that, because it's important. I keep harping on, we keep talking about Charlotte because it's our first key site for the Build 2. But right after Charlotte, we're going back to Phoenix and implementing that. And then we're going to LAX and San Francisco. So we got to be ready right out of the gate after Charlotte to get this ball rolling for the big 27 sites. So I appreciate everybody coming and showing up for this. Take advantage of the opportunity. Really appreciate Al and the NASA team for doing all the hard work. It's been a godsend to help TFDM, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you.